So let's start. Today we are going to learn about malicious prosecution as a tort. Friends, before learning about this, we must know what is the evolution of law of torts, as well as particularly regarding to the malicious prosecution. So, for the efficient working of criminal administration justice, as you know, law expects every citizen to bring criminals to the courts of justice. But because of improper personal motives or the malice of the complainant at times, if an innocent person is hauled up before a court of law, it may result in imprisonment or pecuniary loss to him. Hence, law has recognized the right in such a person to get damages from the person responsible for his malicious prosecution. So, before understanding it, let's understand the term malice. The term malice in common parlance means ill will against a person, but in the legal sense, it refers to a wrongful act done intentionally without just cause or excuse. The term prosecution means a proceeding in a court of law charging a person with a crime. Thus, malicious prosecution means a prosecution on a charge of crime which is willful, wanton, or reckless against the prosecutor's sense of duty and right. As we know in law of torts, there is a legal duty of care, and if there is a breach of duty, then it causes the damage. And if there is a damage, then we have to pay the damages, means the compensation. So the definition in this video, we are going to have the definition, essential, defense, and conclusion. So let's have first the definition. As such, malicious prosecution is the malicious institutions of proceedings against another of unsuccessful criminal or bankruptcy or liquidation without reasonable or probable cause. Now, what are the essentials for a malicious prosecution? Before understanding that, let's understand the background. In India, when a person is prosecuted by the criminal justice system or is put through civil litigation, all he can do is to defend himself. In the event of successfully coming out clean from the due process of law, he is just left with the order of the court. There is the mental stress, agony, the loss of reputation, loss of livelihood and earning, the costs of defending the prosecution, the physical hardships are not accounted for, and the victim of malicious litigation has no legal recourse to protect himself against such abuse of the process of law. Often, while considering malicious prosecution, the ill effect it has on the fundamental rights of the aggrieved person and which are totally ignored. Even the present provisions of the law, which vaguely talk about malicious prosecution and punishment thereto, do not consider the violation of fundamental rights like the right to life and liberty, right to reputation, right to work. Even the Supreme Court of India has said the right to reputation is the part and parcel of right to life and personal liberty, which is given under Article 21 and guaranteed by the Constitution of India. The same was reiterated by the Honorable Supreme Court of India in the case of Umesh Kumar versus State of Andhra Pradesh. The person who is aggrieved by malicious prosecution, his various rights are trampled upon by having to face the unnecessary and malicious litigation. His right to reputation is totally destroyed, considering the social stigma attached to the prosecution in our country, especially if it involves the arrest of a person. Thus, the aggrieved person can claim compensation for the infringement of his rights under the law of torts. This compensation may not get back his reputation, although it acts as exemplary damage and has the ability to prevent, deter, and reduce such malicious prosecution. The Supreme Court of India, while deciding a case, observed the instances of police machinery filing malicious charges increasing day by day, and as such, cops should be punished. The Supreme Court of India has observed there is a rising trend among the women to file malicious prosecution under section 498A of the Indian Penal Code, and that the police should not make automatic arrests in such cases as it permanently scars the reputation of the person. In such a scenario, it is the need of hour to address the issue. It is necessary to add detailed legal provisions that act as an effective deterrent for such vexatious and malicious litigation and compensates the people for their loss of reputation, earnings, livelihood, and the trauma. The evolution of malicious prosecution as such has evolved. Law of malicious prosecution has evolved generously through ages. The basic evolution of the law has taken place in England. The history of torts can be traced back to the rate of conspiracy as early as the reign of Edward I. English courts were concerned about the improper use of judicial proceedings as early as 10th century. In its contours of development, the tort has grown to provide protection and remedy to those who have been wrongly wronged by an abuse of judicial process. Malicious prosecution has its origin in England, and you know that in the case of Manjul Van Jantilal Nakum versus Rajkot Municipal Corporation, the court has expressly observed that we have though adopted many of the principles which were evolved in England, but we have to see the practicality and the suitability to the Indian condition. All right. So let's now understand the five of the essentials. First essential of malicious prosecution is the proceeding must have been instituted or the continued by the defendant against whom we are seeking the remedy. Secondly, he must have acted without any reasonable and probable cause. And thirdly, there must be an element of malice. He must have acted maliciously, and the proceeding must have been unsuccessful and terminated in the favor of the plaintiff. And lastly, the plaintiff suffered damage. But there are certain defenses which are available to malicious prosecution claims. Since the tort of malicious prosecution includes the mental element malice, reasonable and probable cause, which needs to be proved, there are certain shortcomings and loopholes. These shortcomings are in the form of numerous defenses that can be availed in a suit of malicious prosecution. There are various types of defenses that can be taken when one is charged with a claim of malicious prosecution, such as the person may say there is a reasonable suspicion that the plaintiff committed the alleged crime for which he was prosecuted. If somebody is running with some goods or items, then you may suspect the person has stolen something, and on that suspicion you have prosecuted that person. So that was a cause. So it will provide you with the defense. An honest belief by the defendant in the guilt of the plaintiff also a defense available. The existence of reasonable probable cause for the prosecution of the plaintiff can serve as a complete defense. But there are certain defenses which are not foolproof. Please try to understand. So when the prosecution is the discretion or the act of the officers of the law, contributing negligence in situation where plaintiff is at fault, such a situation can arise where the plaintiff through misleading conduct creates malicious impression which form the basis for the reasonable suspicion prosecution for the alleged crime. And judicial authority, judicial immunity is there whenever the court and judge is saying something. If the judge is prosecuting, then it is not considered to be malicious prosecution. And if there is a lawful duty and lawful authority is doing something, that is also having certain defensive. And apart from preservation of the security of the state and country, where is defense available, and there is a statutory bar, statutory limitation, which provides a limitation period for the legal action. After the expiration of said period, the claim is invalid and cannot be permissible in court. However, please mark these words: not all of these defenses can be foolproof in their bare form. And with this, let's reach to the conclusion. The concept of malicious prosecution plays an important role in the protection of man's reputation and prestige. Reputation, as is considered, is the most important facet of any person's life because it is the greatest property a person has. The primary aim of this concept is to protect every person from the mindless and vengeful litigation, be it civil or criminal. It acknowledges not just the importance of a person's reputation but also the trauma every person has to suffer while dealing with any litigation and the consequent losses thereto. So, making malicious prosecution a tort is useful in the following ways. Number one, deterrence is created amongst the people against instituting malicious litigation. And further, this helps the court save its time from wasting on such frivolous litigation. And eventually, the number of cases in court drops down since only the real legal disputes remain, thereby reducing the pendency of cases in courts. So, with this, we end up. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.